I think the thing about this booklet that's so amazing is that we have many samplers. We have many marking samplers.
Right.
We have many needlework pictures. But this gives you the whole range of needlework skills that were taught, that were required of a 19th century young woman to run a successful household.
Right.
You had to make clothes, you had to repair clothes, you had to maintain linens, and it's contained in this. There's
But
the examples.
It could be more than that, in that it could be preparing a girl for employment.
This is true.
Outside, because maybe she wasn't wealthy and that she needed to work outside the home, and she would be a seamstress for somebody, and this would be the basic skills.
That's true, because some of these are very basic. And the other thing that I was curious is, we don't have really public education at this point. So these girls represented in this book are probably middle class to some extent, because it was not inexpensive, probably.
Right.
We don't know that, but I think these specimens go from the simplest stitch to the most complex, and I think it's just remarkable.
And then what I find remarkable is this is considered simple stitching as opposed to fancy work.
Right.
And some of this is so fancy, I can't even imagine doing it, but it was the basics.
Well, they are, and as we turn through this book, you'll see that there's that spectacular little mat that with the bowl of stylized bowl of fruit. It's fabulous. It's just fabulous.
So this would be a straight stitch. This is a couple of things. This is a straight stitch and then an edging stitch to keep it from fraying. And then I love that there's a contrasting color, because you would do it white on white or blue on blue or whatever. But this is to illustrate the actual stitching. And then I want to start seeing how many times, I think it was
Judith.
One of them was in here a lot. She must have been the star pupil.
So what's interesting, to the point you guys made earlier, they're in order. So this is the first class, first and second specimens. They're both done by Judith McCabe.
Are they?
And as you said, they're the simplest. So let's see what.
But absolutely essential stitch. You got to have this one.
So now we have the second, third, fourth, and fifth classes with one example of each.
And you've got patchwork. They're piecing these pieces together, and then
that's to make a quilt.
Applied.
So that if you needed a quilt,
And this kind of chevron design was very popular in dresses, and in the 30s they had these enormous sleeves, and sometimes they would have embellishments or the cuffs. So
it'd be more dressmaking. So this is still functional.
And that's
applique?
It's applique.
Yeah, with a fancy stitch on top.
So you cut out that blossom from that wonderful printed fabric, and look at the shocking pink. Look at the colors. I think we're always surprised how wild these colors are.
And is that the same person? No, maybe.
No, so now we've got Eliza Whitley and Mary Neal.
Yeah.
So as you pointed out, Linda, that is actually that. And then what do you call the stitching that's used to apply it?
That looks like a feather stitch. Or
almost looks like a
cross.
cross. Yeah. He's tiny. And then in the next bit, the buttonholes, all essential.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, herringbone.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Okay.
And then Frances Blakely and Charlotte Farrelly.
And look at her beautiful, beautiful buttonholes.
Oh, and look, here's the buttonholes. So we have buttonholes in linen, because that would fray a lot, and then buttonholes in dress material, which would be finer.
Is that more like what that is?
This is quite.
This one is more. It's not a rounded edge, so that it looks like it's for avoiding the fraying.
Right.
And then look at the border, the edging of that.
Look at that. It looks like machine stitching.
Yeah.
Later, it's so finely done.
So fine.
So Charlotte was a dynamo.
And what's going on in this one? Is that also, are those different stitches running through that? Is that just showing off a stitch, or is that?
Tiny.
I should have brought my loop.
Yeah.
That is tiny. It looks like it's.
There you go.
It just almost like an ornamental.
You know what she's doing? I think she's stitching. Okay, let's see. Oh, she's joining.
Are those individual lengths?
She's taking two pieces of fabric like this and joining.
Oh
it.
my gosh! So it's wow. Get my hair out of the book. That's amazing. Wow.
Oh, I wonder if it's like an open work seam. I don't know.
It's not.
It was important to learn it though. Topper overstitching.
Well, fabric. We have to remember too. Fabric was expensive, and so every
And
bit
luxurious,
was saved. And
Margaret Wilson did a beautiful job of gathering.
oh, and then we have the stitch that was on the
Right.
previous page.
Oh, yeah. And then here we have gathering with ruffles.
Mm-hmm.
This is an enclosed gather, but then that's for ruffles. Wow.
It almost looks like a mini pillow sham or something.
This
doesn't
one?
it? Yeah.
And is that more like a sleeve?
I think so. I think so.
Oh, yeah, or it could be a bodice or a skirt or dress.
Right.
So there are two different, they're learning stitches for function of dressmaking, and then function for a daily life where you need a tea towel or you need a quilt, like you saw that piece
Right.
part, so that they're learning. I mean, there's so many ways that you would apply this. And so now this is lesson 7 and 8, and we're Mary Ann Abbott. First time we saw her.
And Margaret Wilson.
Where are they now?
Well, I think
200, 190 years later.
And this is a lovely little
Ann Rogers.
sampler, needlework sampler with alphabet and numbers. They were still marking textiles and clothing at this
Absolutely.
time. So
And this.
this
Where she's
beautiful
got the name of the
Wonderful.
school.
Mm-hmm.
What is happening after the 1 through 9?
Well,
I
those
see
are
like another
just
2
different-
and a 3. Are they just sort of random? Did they run out of ideas?
No, 9, 10,
What do you
11.
mean?
Like it, and it's
12,
11,
12,
12,
10,
9.
Yeah,
All right.
13, 13.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not
Yeah.
talking about this.
And then the Z gets plugged in the.
Oh
I
yes,
think we
that's,
left
that's
that out.
fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's planning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So these would be done with the idea of teaching a girl about the values of industry and diligence.
Yeah,
Because
patience.
patience.
Yeah.
And I wonder how old these girls were, because a lot of times they were as young as 8.
Mm-hmm.
But this seems like,
These seem very accomplished,
Yeah.
don't they? And these amazing darning.
so this is like
Samples.
invisible
Yeah.
mending,
Yeah.
where you were given a fabric, and you can see the weave is more open than the other ones. This would be probably a linen, and you'd have a hole, and you had to
reweave it.
reweave it.
And this one with that amazing herringbone
Right.
design.
Yeah, this would be a plain weave, and that's a herring.
And again, repairs. You know,
Right. Because you
keep
didn't
things
just throw it out.
maintained.
Right.
And it went. Things were passed down and
Right.
reused, and
Right.
so
Now, I wonder if they were sisters, Mary Ann Rogers and Ann Rogers.
they sure could have been.
And there's Mary Ann, what's her name again?
Mm-hmm.
Abbott.
Or Marianne Abbott, right? And we're now in the 8th and 9th
Yeah,
classes.
it's getting much more complex.
But then what's interesting is that this is a book that's printed up. So this is standard.
Yeah, there
Right.
had to be others.
It wasn't
Yeah.
like these teacher created a book, like a
Mhm.
journal.
Right, right.
This was planned, and where there's a curriculum here.
Right, and students are vying to get a place. I would think in this, and there's that lovely little
Fringe work on
yeah.
that.
This is beautiful, and more complex darning and reweaving things.
So what's going on here? How is that pattern
looks-
made? Is that like
It's
crewel or
probably
something?
on. It's not cruel.
Now
It's-
this is a cross stitch.
yeah, a little cross stitch, which just means as it just
It's
acts.
a 2/2
Yeah.
cross stitch.
So you sort of create the image as you're.
Well, it was drawn on a ground, some sort of a ground, and then it's like.
Is it like the girl in front of the fire with the round thing and she's carefully uses that?
yes, sort of, yes,
Sorry,
yeah.
my imagination.
Yeah. No, and this fringe is just really elaborate and gorgeous.
And the colors. That's one thing, is that because it's been out of the light, the
It's so
colors are
bright.
so vivid and bright, and
Yeah.
everything looks fabulous.
Yeah,
It's-
not too unlike probably it did then.
Exactly.
You know?
That's one of the things that makes this such a fine example, is that the colors are just
as they were.
Screaming originality.
And are these three like the two before
Yes.
it, where it's all of that sort of repair, but showing that those different patterns can be recreated?
And what's interesting is that Westtown samplers often have
Exactly. Yes.
these things, and they were influenced by Ackworth School up in northern England.
Exactly.
And you wonder where the teachers came from that were teaching sewing. You wonder where they came from.
Right.
Did they come from England to Ireland, or
And did they just have all their examples? Were there printed things?
Yeah,
Were there
is there a book?
there could have been a book. We don't know that.
It's fabulous. So these would be all the types of patterns you would see on decorative. Probably a twill weave, like these might be trousers, like a man's trousers you had to mend.
Oh, and that's look at that.
Look at that.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And silk.
Which one are you talking about? The top
This
left?
one. This
Right.
one.
Amelia Farrelly.
But that's a lot like that lesson from before.
It
Right.
is. It is. I wonder if one is this one. Was the other one in North? What was the other one? No, it was silk as well, wasn't it? That must be silk.
And
Yeah.
is it
So that's number
two
13.
colors
Yeah.
in the border, and then
And this we
How many
all
are in
sorts
there?
of 1,
16.
2,
Or
3.
maybe it was more ornate.
Yeah.
So then this would be an element on a shirt,
right.
and you've always had to reinforce the corner of it because that's what would tear. all
Right, the
that.
stress.
Yep.
And then all the sort of stitching down here.
Yeah, look at
and
the tiny, tiny
Oh,
open
goodness.
work. Yeah, a little pierce work.
It's beautiful.
And these almost look like, this one reminds me of a baby flannel or
Yes,
something.
right.
Actually, and you had pointed out that almost the only bit of damage in here is that little corner
Yeah.
thing.
That's
Because
because it's wool. It would indicate that it's
Mhm.
wool. I mean, just by the look of it and its fuzziness, it looks like wool as opposed to the cotton or the silk.
so any moth that ran across this would
Would
find
be
that,
delighted with this.
Yes.
Yes.
and then it moved
Dessert.
on.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Thank heavens.
It may not have been very tasty.
Yeah, maybe I didn't like it. No, but that does look like a baby blanket.
It does,
Or-
doesn't it?
And then these are very decorative stitches.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I can't remember what they're called.
Mhm.
Hold on. Oh, here's some of these cross. That's a double cross stitch. But clearly those stitches needed to be repeated. Okay, you know what? This is interesting. This is almost like that little
Oh,
corner. Yeah, but
Yeah.
those are open. Oh,
They're
are they
little
open?
They're open. Yeah.
Ah.
So someone.
These are filled.
Can you imagine the tiny, tiny stitches that were taken to close that? It's almost like
These were young eyes.
they were
They
very
were
young.
working this. Anyway, well, this is great. Let's see.
Okay.
So one, it's I like how I bet you each girl got to choose which colors. Like, did the blue do the outside or the pink? I often wonder how much
Latitude.
latitude they
yeah.
were given. Yeah. Now here's a new name, Amelia
Farrelly
Farrelly.
Did we see
and
her?
Marianne Biggs. I don't remember
Did we
Miss
see-
Biggs.
I thought we saw Fairly. I don't know. Did you
Could have
run,
been another sister.
Did you run any? Did you try to do
Yeah.
any genealogy on these little girls?
We did not. No.
Okay.
I think there are at least 3 Farrellys, and I assume there's sisters
Yeah.
somewhere, so.
Yeah, I bet they are. I bet
Yeah.
they are. Because they usually were local kids.
Oh.
Oh, this is a spectacular page.
So that's a combination of a lot of the
Yep,
previous
it is.
skills with the gathering
Mm-hmm.
and the lining, and this would be.
And the decorative.
Oh, this
and
is pleating.
look at the pleating in that. Yep. And we have pleating in the shirt as well. And
Is it a
making a
man's
man's
shirt?
shirt. That's a man's shirt.
Right.
Mhm.
And this is very 1830s with the very large sleeves.
Puffy sleeves.
Yeah.
And the high waistline.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So obviously they're practicing their buttonholes there.
Yeah, it's so
my
teeny,
Oh.
tiny, and the
that-
vents
the
on
little-
the side.
yeah.
Oh, so
And
they
I
did
was-
it in that the same,
Same,
process
yeah.
as
Like even-
reinforcing.
Even
Right.
shirts today sometimes
Yeah,
will
yeah,
have
no,
that little triangle
Definitely
on
still
that.
do.
And then this would be like a needle lace.
Mm-hmm.
It's
The colors are also harmonious, as if they're kind of planned. The blue is they seem to. Maybe
how
just what they
long
had.
it would take them. I wonder if this was what was the school year? Was it
That's a good question. I don't
even
No,
know.
I wonder. And
Did they do this at home or did they do this in school? You know, did they do it at a desk?
yeah, no, I don't know.
Did they do it at home and then hand it in? And then,
Right.
because one of the things we don't know is who created the book. Was it their
Mhm.
teacher? Was
Right.
all
I
these
would-
girls the pupils? Were these their best pieces? Like, why did some of the girls do multiple submissions, for lack of a better word?
Well,
Maybe
they
there
may have
were
been
only so many schoolgirls.
and some of them were, I think there's no, just like some people are all thumbs today. Some people were all thumbs back then, and there probably were some that were not. These are the stars, I think.
Yes,
Right.
those are the stars.
And is this intentionally like multiple different styles, or
I
is
think
this
so.
actually stylistically that would have been a real dress? It looks busy, but
Well, it could have been, and I don't.
I don't know enough about.
But they did. I mean,
is that
they're.
all
It's.
open?
It is. I
Is that
believe
actually
is.
joined, like you can
Yes.
see through it?
Like that first stitch that we were looking at, where we were saying, what is that? It was
Right.
joining two sides of a fabric.
Right. That's astounding.
No, that has for such a tiny thing. It has so much detail.
And like, those are meant to be buttonholes. Those dots. Is that right?
I think so.
And the collar.
There's a lot of fabric even in these little tiny things because there's such intense gathering in the sleeves and the bodice and the sleeves of the miniature.
And these seams are even stitched right here,
Mm-hmm.
so that they would have had a length of fabric or a width of fabric,
Mm-hmm.
and they would have to join it together to make it wide enough.
Mm-hmm.
But that little stitching there is killer. I wonder if there are little buttons in there. Are there little buttons? I don't think so.
That would have made it.
I don't think they would have cut the hole.
No. Would have been tough to. Wow.
No, but it does.
It's
It's
amazing.
open.
really.
And what is going on here? Like, there's this stitch to here. Is that just part of the construction of the shirt? You know what I mean? Like, there's not.
Yeah, it's sort of a bib, sort of a. It's the men's shirts were pretty.
Oh, that's interesting.
Much
I
that
hadn't
way.
noticed it. Yeah, I didn't notice it.
And then that little.
That's
There's a
gusset.
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 Yeah, again, so you move around with it.
Right. He gets one. She doesn't.
Mhm.
But she has all this gather.
Right.
Yeah.
That gives you plenty of volume. It's wonderful. Is that the end of the book?
Yeah, the last.
Oh, I didn't want it to end.
The last
No.
page.
What does that say?
It's gone.
Oh, that is
Whatever it
too
was,
bad.
but-
And Susan Farrelly again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So either that was her. What we do know is,
Yeah,
There's
there's
a
it
ghost
was
here.
a
It
marking sampler. Yeah.
and different than the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows in the last 190 years where it went, but it was obviously mounted in here.
No, I just think
this
it's.
class comprises various kinds of straw plating.
For example, rustic, Dunstable, Leghorn, etc.
Wow.
Oh, here, Kildare maybe had a description of the manner of executing the specimens of needlework. Maybe had at the
Depository,
depository
Kildare
Kildare
Place.
Place. I wonder what that is.
I don't
So
know.
we found, that at the time, you had said earlier, Virginia, that these books were clearly blanks. The teacher
Yeah.
would get the blanks. So
Mhm.
those we discovered were printed in Dublin. And at the same time, you could get a book which was, I'm going to give this the right title, A Concise Account of the Mode of Instructing in Needlework as Practiced in the Female Model School, Kildare Place, Dublin.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it was the sort of how-to, it was like
Yeah.
the text.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
if it
that's
still
what
ex-
I'm
does
sure
it
it's.
exist?
I'm sure it does. In fact, if anything, it should be easier to find than this because, as rare as these are, and we know that they're all unique, right? They're all individual
Right.
specimens. I'm sure a lot of them, just like this, were just taken apart.
Oh,
for
sure.
fun. Or some doll got a new
Well,
outfit.
that's
right?
what I did in one sock.
But somebody thought to keep that intact, and that's what's so amazing. And the date of it, 1833, we can't find an earlier example. Like we've looked in auction records and museums. I think we found one that was 2 years earlier, but it wasn't the same. Where it wasn't 16 different girls. It appeared to be either an instructor or something else. But this is the earliest example where the work of all these girls is preserved.
I think it's just remarkable.
It's
to have
wonderful.
So much. It's
such a treat to see.
Yeah, and the education of girls is a fascinating subject, and you can see so much of it was useful information. You know, how to almost like trade training or trade school in a way. You're going to be a housewife or work, as you say, maybe, and this is your ticket to success at that endeavor.
And Virginia, tell us again the story of your connection, if that's the right word, to this book that we didn't know before we started talking about this.
Well, my mother-in-law has Irish roots, and her parents, both parents grew up in Farnham in Cavan County.
Which is where this was done.
And that's where this was done. And her grandfather was a head of school at the Farnham School between 1907 and 1925. So when I saw this, I nearly fell down because what a small world to come across your husband's great-great-grandfather's possible school connection.
Right.
I mean, it was just always a story I heard. And then to see a physical object from a school, it's really incredible.
Absolutely incredible.
It's really wonderful. So they were lucky girls to do this. It would be, I wonder, now, was someone descended from someone in this book, or did they buy it?
No, our consignor bought it. They saw it somewhere, thought it was great, bought it. So we don't know. We don't know what happened between 1833 and 2023. Which is crazy. It really is, 190 years out in the wilderness.
But in the dark.
In the dark.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes it so special.
And kind of dry.
Yes.
It's not bad. It's not moldy or musty or.
The things that we see in paper, like the book itself is completely intact, which is amazing. We're being super ginger because there's these two silk ribbons in the front that are absolutely hanging on by a thread.
Right. Yeah.
But they're the original ones, and they would have tied to the back, where
you can see
this is where they were.
Right.
And just like a portfolio today, an artist portfolio, you close it up and you tie it with a bow.
And that's where the wear was. You
Right.
can see kind of tying it, and then there was a bow.
Exactly.
And what does the cover look like again? Is it?
So it's very plain, very just.
Okay.
Marbleized
Marble.
paper.
Yeah.
Yep. And also completely typical of the period. And so one can imagine a teacher going into Dublin and maybe getting a box of these and bringing them back to the country.
Sure.
And using them year after year. Interestingly, they've crossed out the word
Yeah, that's
here.
what I wonder.
And
Do you see
Which
from
oh
the
yes,
other side?
so it said female model school, and it's not model as in supermodel. I
Right.
think it's a model example of a
Right,
female school.
right.
But someone chose to cross it out, and then they did this very decorative flourish naming Arley Cottage, which is either the village or the area or the building. We just don't know,
Right.
and we don't know if the place where your
Great
great something in
grandfather
law,
or something, yeah.
you might have been in the very same building. And then they've dated it by hand, so there was no date on the page. So they could have bought it 2 years before or that summer, who knows?
Sure.
Right, that's the only thing that's customized in the book, is that page.
Right, exactly. Everything
Except
else.
for the samples.
And
They're all
the-
customized.
So in theory, if there's another one of these out there, maybe it doesn't have the Arley Cottage. It's not dated, and it doesn't have a model. Like, was Crossing Model out because they changed the name, or was that a statement?
Yeah.
One wonders.
Now I noticed that there were 21 lessons, but you wonder if it wouldn't have been 21 a week.
Right, exactly. We don't know because nothing's dated apart from that. So your earlier point of what was the school year, if I had to guess, there probably was no such thing. I think it just started when it started and ended when it ended.
And we may have had different age groups there too. I don't know that.
If they're sisters, you
Yeah,
would.
you would, and so you've got different levels of ability.
Right.
So the class of '33 might have had, all sorts of ages, 7 to 12 or something like that,
Right.
7 to 13, who knows?
There was 16 girls. We figured that out. So there's the 22 specimens done by 16 girls, and then there's the missing one at the end. But I believe she
had
appeared
done something
She had
elsewhere.
done some, she
Yeah.
was one of the
one of the rock stars.
Yeah, stars.
But I think it's a farming community. I think that was the industry there, so that they probably went to school and worked on the farm
Right.
too. So this would be part of their day. It wouldn't be, I don't even know enough about the education system there to know if it was a full day or hours.
And then, it always strikes me as, with American needlework and things, so many, I'll see the parents are farmers, but they've sent their daughter to a school, but there were very well-to-do farmers, and you could be extremely wealthy, and you wanted your, children to have the best. So it happens, here. I would assume it happens there.
So wasn't it? It was on the Farnham estate. So maybe the Farnham family sponsored this school for the workers' children.
That's very interesting.
Could it be because it was tied to, I'm gonna look at my notes here, to the local here we go. So the school is named after the Farnham barony, then under John Maxwell Barry, 5th Baron Farnham, whose county seat was in Arley.
There we go.
And again, going back to the sampler, here we go. I think it was a lot of pride went into. They didn't have to put Farnham School, Arley Cottage. That could have said, could have said Anne Rogers, or it could have said some Irish motto. But that's where they were. And I think last time we talked, you had mentioned something about the crowns.
Right.
But I don't remember what that was and why they might have been significant.
Well, people like to say, oh, if there are crowns on the sampler, then it must be English. But it's not true.
Right. And here's the example.
That's right.
And these devices or spot motifs, whatever you want to call them, appear in English, Scottish, and American samplers. So you have to look at other things.
They're a device to train you on counting stitches and applying them to make something. It's a device.
And so there must have been printed models for these things that came over here.
Oh, sure.
There were pages, so you knew what was the latest over there, and you were, we were following that. So.
Oh yeah. There were pattern books, and maybe there's a pattern book out there that shows you these different motifs.
These darning samples just blow me away. I think that is really complex.
That is really hard.
And did they do different colors just to illustrate what they were doing?
Yes.
Because am I right? It's here where there's the three more.
Yeah, and that's to really highlight it. So
that's to show off the pattern, but to make it invisible, you would be using the threads that were closest to whatever you were mending to make it invisible.
Right.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's really amazing. It's amazing survivor.